What are my needs in being a good mother? What are my needs in living together with this partner? What are my needs in terms of my career that I'm planning? We as women do not seem to be as used to speak those needs out and also determine them in the first place. How are your experiences about that?
Welcome to the Lilith Podcast. I am Caroline Myriel, your host, and invite you to join me to explore what sovereignty means for us as modern women, just like you and me. The Lilith Myth is a story of a woman who stepped into her sovereignty and freedom. In the first season of the Lilith Podcast, I have in-depth conversations with business anthropologist Lilith Wacker about the money truth of women. You will learn a lot about yourself, about your conscious and unconscious money behaviors, and hopefully it'll be worthwhile listening for you. Lilith and I are going to talk about how can you have really fruitful and resourceful conversations with your loved ones, with your partner, with your employer about more equal distribution of your financial resources and how you can have those conversations with sovereignty and get to an outcome that is ideally a win-win for you and the person you're talking with. So welcome, Lilith. It's going to be a very juicy episode. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Hello, everybody. I think we entered now the center of the onion, to keep that analogy. It will be juicy, also probably because we are trying to bring over the reasons why it is so challenging to talk about money, especially with our loved ones.
Yeah, and we can really talk about experiences here personally because we went first. So we will help you empower to have those conversations because we've made a couple of experiences. So we're going to share those with you. And hopefully it'll encourage you to also take a look if you feel affected by what we talked about in the last episodes about unpaid care work and you want to rectify something, or the bank account structure is not favorable for you, or any other topic that you found in the workbook. We'll put the link for the workbook below, where you see your 3 needs for securing survival, or for social relationships, or for building your self-identity is somewhat out of balance, and only you can decide how much is out of balance and what you want to get out of those conversations. But before we go into strategies, what you can do, I think it's worthwhile to have a look at what are at the core things that could hold us back actually from having those conversations with our loved ones or our employer or whoever, maybe siblings, brothers, sisters, whoever you feel like you need to have a conversation. So I guess by now you should be clear, who do I need to talk first? Is it my employer? Is it my family context? That's a very important part. So please download that workbook and really make those exercises that we have provided you based on the first 3 episodes. So Lilith, the onion. So if we have peeled now all those layers and we're at the core, what could still hold us back in order to have that conversation? There are a couple of things I think that are challenging.
Yes, exactly. So imagine you are now very self-aware about some sort of structural inequality. Let's take the example of maybe you feel you're not getting paid enough from your employer and you wanted to ask for a pay raise. I think one first step is to think about how you perceive and value yourself and what you are contributing to that relationship. And there are a couple of strategies on how to start that thinking process.
Yeah. Maybe let's unearth or unpack first a bit. What do we mean by that? Knowing your self-worth and knowing what you contribute, because I think that's one thing already a stumbling block. And I think I noticed it. There was these situations where, you go into a job interview and then, they're going to ask you, what are your 3 strengths? And then a lot of us just come up with something that they might want to hear. But maybe I have completely different strengths. And I think it's more important to be honest to oneself and see our own strength and values that we have.
Yes, absolutely. And I find it difficult to differentiate between my own self-image and what I think what I'm good at and what my strengths are. And then when I, for example, get some feedback from some colleagues or good friends or other people, I'm sometimes super surprised how other people perceive my strength and what points come up. So there
Mhm.
is a gap between self-image and how others perceive me and what I'm contributing.
Yeah, when I handed over the business in the last business review, the CEO said, "Well, your country that you have been leading is at the forefront and all compared to all other European countries." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, I didn't even see that big value that my team and I were bringing to the company. We knew it's going well, but we didn't see it from the lens of the CEO. And I needed that external reference in order to know, okay, I've done a real great job. And for me, it was more like, is my team happy? Can I keep the people in my team? So that's how I knew what I was contributing to the whole
Yeah.
company endeavors.
Yeah. See? So I would say it's really worthwhile asking for feedback. That is one thing. Another thing that you could do is how I learned about what I can bring to the table also professionally is, for example, engaging or getting a coaching or searching for mentoring, really with a goal to align your self-image and how other people perceive you and what you can bring and what you are good at.
Yeah, I've done that quite a bit with coaching clients of mine, where we always start there because there are challenges that are presenting themselves, but without knowing exactly, okay, what can I really bring in and where's my strength and being super aware of it, it's difficult to actually use those skills and let's say superpowers. And that can be in a conversation, like if you talk with your employer to really know what am I actually contributing here and where's the big value. If you want to negotiate a salary rise, it's good to be able to name it. And in the family context, I mean, if you can say, look, my unpaid care work is consisting of this, this, and this, we would have to pay somebody to do this, and that would cost us this, this, and this. So really being clear about what are you contributing and where is your value for yourself, but also perceivable from the outside.
Exactly. And this has got something to do with believing that you bring something valuable to the table and not taking that for granted. And therefore this self-reflection part is so important. And this also varies depending on the context you're in. I would think in a professional context, it might be easier because we know, for example, that women apply for jobs when they think that they can tick all the boxes from the job descriptions. Whereas men, they would apply for the job if they can tick like 50% of the boxes of the job description, right? That is one example from the professional world that reflects in the topic that we are speaking about right now on self-worth and how others perceive ourselves. That is one typical female topic, I would say. Where it becomes a little bit trickier is probably in the private context with your loved ones, because here another factor comes in, which we also have in the professional context, but in the personal context, it becomes maybe a little bit more emotional, which is gender roles and the question of, what do I have to bring to the table in order to be perceived as a good sister, a good daughter, a good friend, a good mother?
Yeah, and that can vary quite a bit. So, your sibling, your brother, your sister can have a completely different view of how you should act as a good sister or a good aunt. And it's very important that we first, before we go in any conversation, have a real good understanding, what role do I want to play and how do I fulfill that role so that it also is a win-win. So it's not just a role I have to play in order to please somebody else. It's also a role that needs to work for us as women, because otherwise we try to adapt to the expectation of somebody else and we don't go into a conversation. That's what we're talking about. What could hold us back from potentially have those conversations? Maybe not being clear, okay, what actually works for me in this role? Like, if you have a brother, then you're the sister. If you have a father, then you're the daughter. And it's a long-standing relationship that you have had. And over the years, there are certain patterns forming. So now, if you want to have a conversation, it might mean that you have to disrupt that kind of relationship, how it has been working so far.
Yes. And if you are planning to do that because you think there is some sort of inequality in between those relations, I think it is key to know what your own needs and goals are. And I can definitely talk about myself here, that for a long time in my life I had difficulties to even come up with a list of my needs and goals, especially the needs. I don't know why that is, but when I talk to my female friends, many of them also have had some, at least some lifespans where it was challenging to come up with a list of what are my needs in this certain life situation. What are my needs in being a good mother? What are my needs in living together with this partner? What are my needs in terms of my career that I'm planning? We as women do not seem to be as used to speak those needs out and also determine them in the first place. How are your experiences about that?
Yeah, well, I definitely can say that, if especially we talked in the last episode about context changes. So I think it takes a while until those needs kind of come out in me and I can really mention them and say, okay, in this context that I'm now going into, whatever it looks like, maybe moving away from a place and moving together with my partner. So I really need to take my time out and have to deeply reflect about, okay, what is it that I need that is not negotiable, and I need to have that. So for me, for example, is to have nature around me so that I can go out and decompress and also connect myself with the nature, because that's when my inspiration flows. That's when I have ideas for the podcast. So I know that's a big need for me to be able to be creative and have thoughts that help me to evolve professionally. So I guess that's another thought or need that goes on the list, but it kind of forms, it's not like it's not doing like this and it's there, at least not for me. Maybe there's people out there who know exactly like this. So that's how I process, I think, in those especially life changes, or if I want to change something, that's the first step I need to do in order to have then the conversation and steer things into the direction. Otherwise, I end up in the middle of a city that I don't want to live in. And it's not gonna be beneficial for me in the long run. So that's how I perceive it. But I'm fully with you. It's not something that I have been necessarily trained on, or I mean, although I'm working with women and I have a lot of tools available, it's a matter of sitting down and really working it through before I have a conversation.
Yeah. And why is that so important? Because it gives you the arguments that others can also then understand and see and respect. And another example would be if a parent gets older and you are in the situation to decide if he or she should move into an elderly home or not, or who's taking care, right? Many of us are finding ourselves sooner or later in that kind of situation. And in my case, it was pretty clear. I always found my self-identity also massively through my professional career and what I'm doing, because I love what I do. So for me, it even though I wanted to care for my father, and I'm doing that, but how so was heavily dependent on what my needs were around my career. And my needs are clearly, I want to keep that career and not compromise too much. So this was the basis for any conversations with my family members on how we are going to set this life context up. And over this approach, we came to a win-win-win situation, right? Where everybody could say, okay, for this life context, until it changes, we are fine with that. And I didn't get out of that situation with a feeling of, oh, I overcompromised here, or I'm over proportionally investing into my social relations without getting anything back, right? It's exactly this trade-off logic that back in the days I've been applying rather unconsciously, and with the help of the study, it became conscious to me, and I was lucky because I was like, oh yeah, I intuitively was on the right path, and that was very helpful also in the retrospective.
Yeah, that's why we can't reinforce enough. The workbook is kind of like an absolute must before going into any conversation, because that will help to formalize or help you to verbalize your need, because we have got those 3 needs, and you will find, no matter what your life context is, somehow you will be able to contribute them into those 3 needs. And then you can see, where do I need to make an adjustment? And then it'll be easy. And I like what you said, and we've been touching on it briefly in previous episodes about this win-win approach. So if you go into a conversation, we know that for us as women, from the results of the study you conducted on behalf of Accenture Song, that there is this urge in us women to have social relations, and ideally we have win-win situations. So it's great that you know what your need is, and then it's also maybe good to think about what is the need of the other, so that when you ask, or when you want to ask for adaptation, you can go in and have a conversation around that win-win approach and see, okay, what needs to happen so that both parties win, and it'll come more easy to you, because we're talking still about the challenges to overcome to actually have those conversations with our loved ones mainly.
Yeah. And building up on that idea, knowing your needs and your goals in a certain life context is very helpful for the point that we've been talking about earlier, the self-perception and the self-value. Because normally we humans are good at what we love doing. And this is deeply connected, right? And when we do what we love doing, then it will be easier for us to find our personal strength. And that will probably feed into building our own self-identity. And the result of that will be some sort of outcome that will feed into securing survival and your financial autonomy. And it is that deep how those things are interconnected, and understanding how they interrelate in certain life contexts gives you a good foundation with good neutral arguments that you could use to go into a challenging conversation around, I want to move, I want to have this new job, I want to reduce my working hours to be able to take care of an elderly parent or the children, or whatever that life context might be. But this framework helps you really to reflect before you go into that conversation and build some valid arguments that are non-negotiable to you, and that gives you also the inner strength and the possibility to follow your intuition, to be also successful in those conversations. At least thrive for that win-win, or push that win-win, whatever the outcome might be.
Another thing that could hold us back, and I think that's also related to anything that we have discussed about, is to be afraid of disrupting, having the family piece or the social piece for some time not as smooth and harmonious as we would like it to be, because we like those social relations and they should be harmonious. So if we then go in and say, okay, but I want to change something because I want this and that, there are so many things that can fire in the brains of our partner that we talk with about those changes, because for them the system has been working so far, so they might not want to disrupt and change. But maybe we know already, okay, they're not going to like it, but in order to be able to look into the mirror and say, yeah, that's who I am and that's my sovereignty, I know that I need to disrupt something. And then being able to live with that situation, even if somebody is not happy with our approach of changing something.
Yeah.
How did you handle that in the past, Lilith?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I think what helped me personally was also my professional career, like working in strategy and innovation and future oriented topics, right? So the terms disruption and change and innovation came very natural to me due to my job, because I'm a researcher, right? And my job is really to reassess the familiar, like the consisting structures of things, being able to explain that and finding ways how to reassemble that in a better way to induce change. And this helped me massively in the past to not be afraid of change, and B, accepting the fact that, for example, people pleasing and wanting to find a consensus between too many stakeholders would always lead to mediocre outcomes. And if I wanted to change something massively, I knew that I must be prepared for some sort of barriers, some sort of criticism, some conflict. And by knowing that, then the second step or the consequence was, okay, how do I deal personally with conflict and withstanding that and staying in that situation and staying with my thoughts and inner feelings of that, by at the same time trusting that a really good relationship can also withstand that crisis and something better can come out.
I mean, the whole podcast is about exploring what sovereignty means for us as women. So you can also see it as an exploration. How does it feel, and how can I actually step into more sovereignty in my existing relationships, no matter with whom it is, because if I don't do that, then there's no stepping up into more sovereignty. There is kind of like, it stays the same until maybe something from the outside, let's say your partner makes a life-changing decision, and then you just get along with it, but maybe you're not happy with that decision. And then, starting to then think, okay, what is my need? What is my goal here? Will take some time. And just being able to hold that, knowing that it's okay to not know everything, but knowing, okay, I need my space, I need my sovereignty and my freedom within this relationship, within this employee relationship, whatever, but making that conscious choice that sovereignty is an important value to me, and therefore it's worth going down that path. And by no means, I mean, I have been standing my ground in the past, and it comes with some disruption of the social peace for some time. But my experience has been that even if we didn't talk for a while, at some point in that process, we both reflect. And then when we meet again, we have both moved and something has changed afterwards. And the next level was possible because of that.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit, because there's so much in there, right? I think, first of all, you have to be conscious that there will be no change if you please everybody. This is not going to happen. This is not how disruption and innovation works. There need to be some sort of disruption. It sits in the word itself. That's, first of all, the important point to understand here. Secondly, this doesn't mean that you will completely destroy your social relations and your friendships and the relation with your loved ones, as long as everybody is capable of some sort of self-reflection and conscious reflection with each other. Underneath that lays your self-perception and value, and if you believe if you're worthy of love and belonging. This is very helpful if you nourish that belief, because this gives you the basis for all of those tricky conversations. You are worthy of love and belonging, and therefore your self-worth and perception has a certain height. And this gives you the basis to be self-reflective and reflect with others and with each other. And this might sound very theoretical, but I think this is really the core of sovereignty. And this self-worth and believe yourself that you are worthy is really the core that helps you to withstand conflict and also to set boundaries. And those boundaries are very important. It might lead initially to a situation of conflict and people not speaking to each other for a little while, because of course we need to reflect on things, right? But the good thing is, we as humans, we are able to change our mind. We are able to change our perception. We are able to learn and to grow and to gather some knowledge. And please, let's use that and grow together to change the world in whatever life context, to make it a tiny little bit better and a tiny little bit more equal. And sovereignty in women would do a lot good.
Yeah. Well, that's the very big picture, like if we all can step into that sovereignty, whatever it might look like for you when you listen to this podcast, we really just want to encourage you to not shy away. Like, you're not shying away to peel an onion, although you're gonna maybe sneeze a bit because there can be some juicy stuff coming out, but that's a good thing, that makes the meal more tasteful in the end. and you're gonna enjoy it then together. So it's kind of a win-win, although there might be, like I said in the first episode, I think, we might squeeze out a couple of little tears because the change is necessary, the disruption is necessary of that existing, maybe comfortable place that we have gone into without realizing that we're paying a long-term bill, let's say, as women, if we don't speak up. And we have discussed in a lot of previous episodes about unpaid care work, about the pension gap, all those long-term effects. So you can go back to those episodes. But in a nutshell, Lilith, because I think there are so many things to consider. And I think just let's maybe wrap up in 2-3 clear action steps. What do we recommend so that those conversations can happen and will happen and they will come out on the positive end?
Yeah. I think first step, think about your self-worth, self-perception, and what value you bring into any kind of social relation or professional relation. Do that by getting feedback, getting a coaching, mentoring, to align your self-image and how other people perceive you. Secondly, ask yourself the question of what does it take to be a good role, meaning friend, sister, partner, mother, daughter, whatever that female role is in your life. And what does it really take to be a good one? Is it really being perfect in the kitchen or organizing children's birthday, or is it when your child says I love you, or when your dad says thank you for everything? So what is that really? Thirdly, determine your needs and goals in life. So what is really important for you? What are your needs in order for you to be strong and thrive and grow? Make a list, write that down. And lastly, be prepared to have hard conversations with that, form good arguments out of the former points, withstand some conflict for a little while, and go into self-reflection and mutual reflection with each other, and be conscious that there will be no change when you try to please everybody around you.
I'd like to add 2 things. I love your points. One thing is choose your moment wisely, right timing. So I think one of the study respondents you talked about was, okay, I wait till it's a good moment. So, and in NLP, we also have that recommendation, act from when you are in a good place. So don't have those conversations when you're stressed out and the whole day has gone wrong, and then you add that conversation in the evening with your partner. What I'm saying is like place that conversation strategically well when you and your partner are relaxed enough to be open enough and not fall into default modes. I think that's a very important one that we have in our capacity and that you can choose. It doesn't have to be tomorrow just because you listened to the podcast today. Ask yourself, at the end of next year, do I still want to be in the same place as I am today, or do I want to have moved the needle towards more sovereignty for myself as well in order to create more equality? It's not about you being like super selfish and pushing your agenda. It's coming back to that win-win, and win-win means that you also win.
Absolutely. I love that. I think empathy is key, not only strategy, but strategy and empathy, because it probably doesn't make any sense to have that conversation when anybody is stressed. So
yeah, let me maybe add, because we know it can be a juicy topic, and Lilith and I want to support you. If you have a question, if you want to talk something through. So we've created a very safe space for women listening to this podcast. It's called the Alignment Community. And I'm going to put the link below this episode where we invite you to join the Alignment community. It's a free space where we can exchange our thoughts so that we feel empowered to have those conversations. And maybe if you have any doubts about what we discussed or want to have something very concrete, we're happy to meet you there. And we also share a bit more about our experiences in there because there's more time to do that there. Well, Happy New Year to everyone. And we hope you have a real good one. Thanks, Lilith, for these juicy topics so that we can keep the social peace in our relationships, but also get more sovereignty.
Thank you very much. I hope this is worthwhile and gives some inspiration.
See you in the next episode.